Canada just posted the second highest growth rate in the entire G7. Also, Canada is apparently in a recession. Same country, same quarter. Both headlines ran within days of each other, and somehow neither one mentioned the other existed. One of them is technically correct. The other's doing something a little more interesting with the truth. Hi, I'm Bo Kaufman, and this is the Sanity Project, where we dig past the algorithm-driven noise to find the stories that actually matter. Today, we're pulling apart a number that's small enough to be a rounding error, and a political fight that's loud enough to make you think the country was on fire. Here's the number at the center of it, negative 0.1%. That's it. That's the entire second quarter of this recession. Not a wildfire-level crisis, just a sliver of a percentage point, thinner than the margin Statistics Canada itself uses when it quietly revises its own reports later. So why is one political camp calling this a collapse, while the other says it's basically over already? Simple. The same data supports two completely different stories. Only one of them survives contact with the actual sourcing. There's a modeling exercise buried in an independent economic study, showing what almost happened, a number so far from reality that it reframes the entire fight. There's a policy response getting blamed for damage it may have actually prevented. And then there's one small, strange detail about robots that nobody in the political shouting match is talking about. At all. Let's get into it.
And you see that your country just posted the second highest economic growth rate in the entire G7 for the year.
Which is, that's incredibly strong news on paper.
Right. But then you turn on the news, and the headlines are screaming that you are officially in a recession.
Yeah, it's a completely bizarre paradox.
It really is. And that's exactly the paradox Canada finds itself in right now. It has sparked this massive, massive political collision.
Oh, absolutely.
Because on one side, you have the leader of the opposition pushing this narrative of a, quote, Carney recession.
Right, arguing that it's a domestic crisis caused by the incumbent government's policies.
Exactly. And then on the other side, the government claims this is entirely the fight-out of a massive external shock.
Yeah.
Specifically, U.S. tariffs.
Which puts you, the average citizen, in just a terrible position.
Right.
Because you're sitting there trying to figure out who to believe when, billions of dollars and hundreds of thousands of jobs are supposedly on the line.
Yeah. And when the rhetoric gets that loud, the only way through is to just, mute the politicians entirely and look at the raw math.
Exactly. Let the data do the talking.
Which is exactly what our stack of sources allows us to do today. We're pulling from this Spring Economic Update 2026, a major independent macroeconomic study from the Cirano Institute, and the raw ledger data from Statistics Canada.
It's a really solid stack of evidence.
It is. But I want to be crystal clear right up front. We are not here to play referee for any political party.
No, not at all.
Our only allegiance on this deep dive is to you, the listener, and to the data itself. We're just going to audit these conflicting claims forensically.
Right, because we need to figure out how an economy can simultaneously be leading the pack in growth while, triggering the technical tripwires of a recession.
Yeah, because if we just look at the surface level labels, nothing makes sense.
No, it doesn't. And to understand the disconnect, we really have to start with the mechanics of how a recession is actually declared.
Okay, let's get into it.
Because it's not based on a general feeling of economic anxiety, and it's not a subjective label either.
Right.
The technical definition, which is universally accepted by economists, is 2 consecutive quarters of negative real gross domestic product growth. It's a strict mathematical binary.
Okay, let me stop you there, because the term GDP gets thrown around a lot.
It does.
And we need to unpack what we're actually measuring. So when we say GDP shrank, are we talking about corporate profits, or the amount of money in people's pockets, or government spend? What is actually going into this bucket?
Well, broadly speaking, it's the total monetary value of all finished goods and services produced within the country's borders in a specific time period.
Okay.
So it includes consumer spending, your grocery bills, your haircuts, plus business investment, government spending, and net exports.
Got it.
So if that total bucket shrinks for 6 straight months, you trigger the recession label.
Okay, so let's crack open the Statistics Canada data and look at the actual numbers that triggered this label.
Let's do it.
Because in the fourth quarter of 2025, the data shows Canada's GDP contracted by 1.0% annualized.
Right.
And then in the first quarter of 2026, it contracted by 0.1%. So that's 2 consecutive quarters in the red.
Exactly. Canada met the technical bar by the narrowest possible margin.
But hold on, the term annualized always trips me up.
Sure.
Does that mean the economy actually shrank by a full 1% in those 3 months?
No, it doesn't. And that's a really vital distinction. Annualized means that if the economy continued shrinking at that exact 3-month pace for a full year, it would result in a 1.0% drop.
Oh, okay.
So the actual contraction in that specific quarter was just a fraction of that.
Right.
But the really fascinating number is that Q1 2026 figure.
Yeah.
Negative 0.1%.
Negative 0.1. I mean, that sounds microscopic.
Because it is. It's statistically, practically invisible. And this brings us to a massive caveat that institutional economists are currently stressing over.
What's that?
A reading of negative 0.1% is so close to the baseline of 0 that it falls entirely within the standard margin of statistical revision.
Wait, I need to make sure I'm grasping this. Are you saying Statistics Canada might just change the math later? Like decide the recession never even happened?
Yes.
How does an official government number just get revised out of existence?
Because, calculating the GDP of an entire G7 nation in real time is incredibly difficult.
Well, yeah.
Initially, agencies rely on surveys, early tax data, and samples to put out an advance estimate.
Right, they don't have all the receipts yet.
Exactly. But as the months pass, the hard, comprehensive data rolls in. You get late reported manufacturing figures, finalized retail sales, updated service sector metrics.
Okay.
So Statistics Canada routinely revises its initial estimates based on this firmer data. And when your margin is just 1/10 of 1%, a slightly better than expected month in, say, software exports could easily flip that negative 0.1% into a positive 0.1%.
Yeah.
And if that happens, the consecutive quarter rule is broken. Legally and technically, the recession disappears from the historical record.
Okay, let me try an analogy here. It's like trying to weigh a massive loaded cargo ship while it's bobbing up and down in the ocean.
Oh, I like that.
Right. So the scale says the ship is 1 pound over the legal weight limit, but the margin of error on the scale itself, adjusting for the waves, is 50 pounds.
Exactly.
So you can technically write them a ticket based on the reading, but the reality is you don't actually know if they're overweight yet.
That captures the mechanical reality perfectly. The numbers show an economic dip, undeniably, but characterizing a potential statistical rounding error as a systemic structural collapse of the Canadian economy, that's a severe misreading of what the ledger actually says.
Right, especially when you factor in that the overall growth for the calendar year of 2025 was 1.7%.
Which is huge.
Yeah, second highest in the G7. Which actually brings up a great point for you, the listener.
Yeah.
We really want to ground this deep dive in reality. Yeah. Did you feel a systemic collapse in your daily life over the last 6 months? Or did your day-to-day feel relatively stable despite the headlines? Tell us in the comments. We want to know.
Yeah, drop a comment.
And if you value this kind of objective math-first breakdown, please like this deep dive. It tells the algorithm to push evidence-led analysis to more people who are tired of the political noise.
Because grounding this in reality is crucial. Even if the dip was microscopic, something still caused it, right? If the country was growing robustly in 2025 and then suddenly the brakes locked up in Q4, we have to look for the catalyst, like what actually triggered the contraction.
And that is where we turn to the Spring Economic Update 2026.
Yes.
Because the official accounting explicitly attributes the contraction not to domestic policy shifts, but to an external shock. Sweeping U.S. tariffs implemented by the current administration in Washington.
The Trump tariff shock.
Exactly. But I want to push back on this a little because blaming the United States is like the oldest political deflection tactic in Canadian history.
It definitely is.
So how can we prove this wasn't just domestic mismanagement masking itself behind a trade dispute?
Well, we prove it by looking at the specific sectors that contracted.
Right.
If it were a domestic fiscal crisis, you would expect a broad-based, uniform decline across the entire economy. Consumer spending plunging, housing collapsing, domestic services drying up.
Right, the whole ship sinking at once.
Exactly. But the Statistics Canada data shows something highly targeted. The losses were heavily concentrated in business investment and goods exports, specifically in the manufacturing and resource sectors directly exposed to those new U.S. tariffs.
Okay, so the data leaves a fingerprint.
Yes.
The parts of the economy that deal directly with American buyers took a hit, while the rest of the domestic machinery was still humming.
That's exactly the case. A tariff is fundamentally a tax placed on cross-border trade.
Right.
When the U.S. applied these tariffs, it suddenly made Canadian goods significantly more expensive for American buyers. So naturally, orders slowed down.
Makes sense.
But more importantly, it froze business investment. Because if you're a Canadian manufacturer, you are not going to build a new factory or hire 200 new workers when your biggest customer just threw up a massive financial wall.
Yeah, you'd wait and see.
Right. That freeze in investment is the exact mechanism that dragged the GDP into the red in Q4.
Okay, so the cause was external. But that leads to the next massive political argument. One side says the government failed to manage this crisis, while the other side says they basically saved the economy.
And this is where it gets really interesting.
So let's bring in the Cirano study, because this is where the macroeconomic modeling gets fascinating. Cirano is a premier independent research network.
Right.
And in early 2025, they ran a simulation, basically asking what happens if the U.S. applies a full tariff and Canada simply absorbs it without retaliating or shifting trade strategies.
And their models projected that under a scenario of total capitulation, Canadian real GDP would contract by a staggering 3.2%.
3.2%.
Yes. To put that in perspective, that is the kind of macroeconomic damage you associate with the 2008 Great Recession.
Wow.
It would have meant catastrophic job losses and a deep, painful structural crisis.
But the actual contraction, as we just established, was 1.0% in Q4 and 0.1% in Q1.
Exactly.
Which is a tiny fraction of that 3.2% projection. And the claim in the sources is that Canada's policy response, the retaliatory tariffs, and supply chain diversification, it actually reduced the tariff damage by roughly 2/3.
It did. The numbers land really hard on that.
But I'm going to need you to explain the mechanics of that, because honestly, it sounds counterintuitive.
How so?
Well, a tariff is a tax. If the U.S. taxes our exports, and we retaliate by placing tariffs on American machinery and goods coming into Canada, aren't we just raising prices on our own businesses and consumers?
It's a fair question.
How does taxing ourselves mitigate a recession?
It's a brilliant question, really, and it gets to the core of trade economics. Retaliatory tariffs do carry a domestic cost. They definitely raise prices on certain imports, but they mitigate the broader macroeconomic damage through two vital mechanisms.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, they generate massive federal revenue. The government collects those border taxes, and they can immediately recycle that capital into subsidies or support programs for the Canadian industries that are bleeding from the U.S. tariffs. It acts as an offset.
Ah, okay. So you tax the American imports, take that cash, and basically hand it to the Canadian lumber mill or aluminum smelter to keep them from laying off their workforce.
Exactly. That is mechanism number one. Mechanism number two is leverage.
Leverage.
Yeah. By inflicting targeted pain on specific U.S. political swing states, taxing things like Kentucky bourbon or Wisconsin cheese, you create immense political pressure within the United States to negotiate exemptions for Canadian industries.
Oh, I see.
It forces the U.S. administration to back off from a blanket tariff to a more manageable targeted level, so you aren't just absorbing the punch, you are actively forcing the other side to lower their fists.
Wait, so the exact policy response being attacked actually acted as, like, an umbrella that blocked 2/3 of a torrential economic downpour?
Basically, yeah.
So the retaliatory policy wasn't an economic shield that magically blocked all the damage. It was more like a crumple zone in a car.
That's a very apt analogy.
The collision still happened. The front bumper, the tariff-exposed sectors got smashed. But the engineering in the policy absorbed the kinetic energy, allowing the passenger cabin, the broader economy, to survive the impact without being crushed.
Absolutely. And we also have to look at the second half of that mitigation strategy, which is diversification.
Right.
The data shows that Canadian businesses didn't just sit around waiting for the political standoff to end. They actively rewired their supply chains.
Well, let's dig into that data, because we have the absolute latest figures to fact-check the current state of the economy.
Yeah.
And if the narrative is that we are trapped in a crisis, the monthly GDP prints should show a downward spiral. But the spring economic update tells a wildly different story. Let's do a structured fact check here, hitting 5 key facts that the Poilievre narrative isn't telling you.
I love this. Let's do it.
Okay, fact 1. We already touched on this, but growth in 2025 was 1.7% despite the tariff shock hitting in Q4.
Which again, second highest in the G7.
Fact 2. Look at March 2026. The data shows the economy was already expanding at a rate of plus 0.4% before the technical recession was even officially declared in the headlines.
Right. The monthly data is where the Carney recession narrative really starts to detach from the mathematical reality.
Fact 3. April 2026 data. Statistics Canada had projected a 0.4% expansion, but the actual print came in at plus 0.5%.
Which beat expectations.
Yes, proving to be the strongest monthly expansion since July 2025.
And we have to look at where that growth is coming from. It connects directly to your point about diversification.
Which brings us to fact 4.
Right. When the U.S. market became hostile, Canadian businesses aggressively pivoted. The spring economic update shows that non-U.S. goods exports surged significantly. They were up double digits, specifically 13.6%.
There is a staggering statistic in here about the UK specifically. Exports to the United Kingdom shot up over 60%, largely driven by gold shipments.
Yeah.
But how does a pivot like that actually happen mechanically? I mean, A mining company can't just put a different stamp on an envelope and ship gold across the Atlantic instead of across the border.
No, it requires an incredible amount of logistical agility.
Right.
It means establishing new banking letters of credit, securing different maritime shipping routes, and negotiating new refining contracts in London instead of New York. What the data tells us is that Canadian industry proved highly adaptable.
They found new buyers to replace the American orders that dried out.
Exactly.
And finally, fact 5. We have forward projections from the big institutional players. The OECD, the International Monetary Fund, and the Bank of Canada are all pointing to a continued robust recovery.
Not a collapse.
Right. Which forces us to apply a critical analytical test to the political claims here. The opposition argues that the current government's approach has failed. But what is the proposed alternative? What would Poilievre have done differently?
That is the ultimate counterfactual challenge.
Based on the political platforms discussed in the sources, the alternative prescription was closer alignment with Washington.
Right.
Dropping the retaliatory tariffs, accelerating concessions to U.S. trade demands, and pivoting away from domestic clean energy investment to basically mirror U.S. policy.
And if we plug that alternative into the macroeconomic models we just discussed, the outcome is highly problematic.
How so?
Well, without retaliatory tariffs, Canada would have surrendered its leverage and lost the revenue needed to offset the damage. We likely would have absorbed the full brunt of that 3.2% GDP contraction projected by Cirano.
Wow.
And stepping away from clean energy investments would mean abandoning our position in the global supply chain just as international demand for things like lithium and cobalt is surging.
So capitulating to U.S. trade demands wouldn't have saved the economy. It would have turned a shallow puddle into a sinkhole.
The math strongly suggests that counterfactual would have been demonstrably worse.
Okay, but everything we have discussed so far, quarterly GDP percentages, monthly export fluctuations, trade standoffs, that is essentially the economic weather.
Yes.
It tells us if it's raining or sunny today. But if we want to know if the economy is actually structurally sound, we have to look at the climate. We have to zoom out and look at decade-scale capital.
This is a vital pivot. Short-term volatility and microscopic GDP dips make for great political attack ads.
So for sure.
But institutional capital tells the true story of an economy's foundation. And right now, the sources point out that Canada is currently leading the G7 in per capita direct investment inflows.
Okay, wait, I need a definition there. What exactly qualifies as a direct investment inflow? Are we talking about like foreign day traders buying Canadian tech stocks on an app?
No, not at all. Foreign direct investment, or FDI, is when a global entity, so like a sovereign wealth fund, or a multinational corporation, purchases a lasting controlling interest in a Canadian enterprise.
Okay.
We are talking about building physical factories, establishing mining operations, or funding massive infrastructure projects. This is capital that gets bolted to the ground.
Give me an example from the sources. What are these entities actually building?
Look at the critical minerals strategy.
Right.
Global manufacturers are pouring billions into Canadian lithium, cobalt, and nickel extraction and processing. They are betting that Canada will be the indispensable node in the future of electric vehicle and battery manufacturing.
Oh, wow.
You also have things like the Darlington SMR nuclear project and the expansion of energy export capacity like the Trans Mountain pipeline to Asia. These represent massive, decade-scale capital allocations.
Why does this matter more than the Q1 GDP dip?
Because institutional investors are entirely immune to political headlines and quarterly noise.
That makes sense.
When a multinational allocates $10 billion to build a battery plant in Ontario, they aren't looking at a negative 0.1% GDP print from last month.
Right.
They are running models for the 2030s and 2040s. They're looking at the rule of law, the education of the workforce, the availability of clean power, and access to trade networks. They are voting with billions of dollars that the Canadian structural foundation is incredibly solid.
It's like judging the success of a newly built skyscraper by a smudge on the lobby window.
Exactly.
The structure is what matters.
Yeah.
It's like looking at an orchard. The politicians are screaming about a sudden frost that killed a few leaves on Tuesday, but the global agricultural conglomerates are busy planting 10,000 new apple trees because they know the soil is rich and the long-term climate is perfect.
And that institutional confidence is exactly why the Bank of Canada and the IMF are projecting sustained long-term growth. The foundation is holding the weight, regardless of the temporary frost.
So let's pull all of this together and look at the final verdict here. We started this deep dive with a clear mission.
Right, to investigate the conflicting claims about the state of the economy.
Does the data support the narrative of a domestic Carney recession crisis or a rebounding economy hit by an external shock? And the math is just definitive.
It really is.
The data shows the technical recession was incredibly shallow. It was externally caused by a U.S. tariff shock. It was mitigated by retaliation, and it is already over.
Yes.
The April data confirms a massive rebound. Poilievre's prescription would have made it worse. The reality is Canada is not in crisis, it is in recovery, and the outrage machine is running on empty.
Well said. And hey, if you value this kind of forensic, data-driven analysis over political spin, please like this deep dive and subscribe to the Sanity Project. We want you with us so you never miss a fact check.
Absolutely.
And jump into the comments, leave a comment with the economic questions you want us to tackle next. We read them all.
We really do. And as always, we believe in showing our work. If you want to go deeper on any of these topics, verify any of these numbers, or look at the StatCan data yourself, the full research and sourcing is at blog.thesanity.org. Everything cited, nothing hidden.
Before we wrap, there is one subtle detail buried in the sources that I think is truly fascinating to mull over.
Oh, what's that?
We talked about how businesses adapted to the tariff shock by finding new markets, but Statistics Canada is also reporting a rapid acceleration of Canadian businesses adopting artificial intelligence and advanced robotics specifically to improve their operational efficiency and offset those new tariff costs.
Wait, really?
Yeah. It forces you to wonder, could this painful, external, Trump-induced trade shock actually be the catalyst that forces Canadian industry to finally solve its decades-old productivity lag?
That is an incredible thought. The very pressure meant to damage the system might be the exact mechanism that forces it to evolve into something stronger.
Exactly.
Definitely something to keep in mind the next time you hear someone claim that the sky is falling.
What strikes me most isn't the GDP number. It's how confidently people build entire arguments on top of a decimal point that might not even survive the next revision. The economy that actually shows up in the data isn't the one shouting on cable news. It's quieter than that. Mining contracts, new shipping routes to London, factories that keep getting built regardless of which party is currently panicking. That's usually where the real story lives, not in the headline, but in what people do with their money when nobody's watching. If this kind of forensic numbers-first breakdown is more useful to you than another shouting match, subscribe to the Sanity Project and check the sourcing yourself at thesanity.org, because we'd genuinely rather you not just take our word for it. See you next time.
If you want more facts and less fear, hit subscribe. Check out the next breakdown wherever you're listening or watching. Stay sane, Canada.